Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews Saturday Conversation Show, an interview series where I talk to entertainment media personalities, content creators, and filmmakers about their work and love of film. Today's guest is Jacob Airey, a movie reviewer, podcast host, and pop culture critic whose work can be found at his website StudioJake Media and his YouTube channel StudioJake. Jacob is also an author with his novels Cacophony, The Seven Royals, All Good Things, and the Seven Royals Breaking the Stars available for purchase, and everyone will be able to find links for these books and for Jake's website and YouTube in the production notes below. I really recommend everyone check out Jacob's work and check out his novels as well, because he is, to me, one of my favorite watchers on YouTube. And Jacob, I got to say, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I know we had a discussion a couple of years ago about superhero movies on, I think it was in like 2022 or 2021. I don't remember what year it was, but it's good to see you again. And
it's good to see you again too. And thank you for having me back.
yeah, it's really interesting. I was doing a really deep dive into the world of Jacob Airey, and there was a lot of things that came up that I didn't know about you, and I just want to really get some clarification about some things and about your journey from like young author to like the online presence that you are now. But I think I might go all the way back a bit and just add a little of my own personal kind of twist here. So I got two boys, aged 12 and 9, and I can't help it. Well, maybe I could, but they really like the things that I liked when I was a kid, because the stuff that I liked when I was a kid, I still like now. I still like my comic books, I still like my movies and such. So now they're deep into that stuff as well. My older son especially, he loves Godzilla now, and my youngest loves Sonic and such. And it made me think, with your journey, I remember hearing in an interview that you said your dad was like a big Star Wars fan, and that kind of his Star Wars fandom was something that kind of rubbed off on you. Is that true? And is that kind of what
Yeah,
started you down the road of geekdom in a certain way?
yeah, it actually was my I always like to tell people I think I said this to Andrew Clavin. I had really good parents who made sure that I was always reading, and they were showing me really good movies and stuff like that. They want because they were both ministers, but they wanted me to have a well-rounded look at culture. So I really appreciated that about them. But yeah, my dad was a big Star Wars fan, and in fact, my mom tells the story about when they were dating. My dad actually still had his X-wing model. I think he did
Mhm.
eventually sell it, but she says one of the first things your dad did was he showed me that X-wing model that he had. So yeah, that kind of rubbed off on me. And I remember we had the VHS tapes, just to age myself, we had the VHS tapes of when George Lucas first digitally enhanced it. So it was before he put in all the new scenes, but he just digitally enhanced the effects and stuff like that. And that
Mm.
was my first experience with Star Wars. And then my mom actually was a Trekker. I know a lot of people say Trek E. That's actually what outsiders call us. But she was the one who really got me into Star Trek. So it was really funny. I had a well-rounded nerd education, if you will.
That's pretty cool, and it kind of reminds me a lot of what I'm with my kids. Like, I'm a Christian as well, and I try to make sure I have a good kind of mix of kind of like Christian literature. We read C.S. Lewis and we read Tolkien and all that kind of stuff, but also the more kind of comic booky kind of things as well. Interesting thing about you is that I also heard in the interview that when you were 16, you actually had a mystery novel that was published. Is this right? And you had a bit of
It was not
problems
published.
with
It almost
no.
got published.
So you had
It
a bit of
was
problems with the publication house around that time. Is that correct?
It was actually that my agent. So my parents had actually found me an agent, and what he did was he did it by commission. So he got paid based on your book sales. So it was a three-part kind of YA novel, one of those kids solve mysteries type books,
Right.
and it was. I actually had an agent, and at the time, Aragon, the dragon novels were really
Yes.
popular, and that author, he was 16 when that book came out, and he might have been 17. Someone fact check me, but he was very young, is my point. And so that there was big hype for getting younger authors. Well, my agent, he just dropped me one day, totally ghosted me. He had connected me with a not a Christian publishing house, but one that was just clean fiction, because there was nothing in it that was objectionable as far as parentals, it was a very PG book. And it was he had connected me with this publishing house. Everything was going great. We were even starting to get into covers talk. My agent just ghosted me and stopped replying to my emails, wouldn't return my phone calls. My parents tried to get involved. And since we hadn't signed anything with the publishing house saw that my agent had dropped me, and then they just dropped me as well. They just said, sorry, because you don't have an agent anymore. We're going to drop publication of this. So it was, that was kind of a little bit of a blow of my ego. I had started writing Cacophony at that point. At 16, I had already started writing Cacophony, and that blew my ego. That book to this day has never been published, but I kind of chuckled though, because it's not really that good. Reading it now as an adult and having 3 other books out, I'm like, I think I need to edit this before this ever gets published. But it was kind of, that was a really sobering experience that I had when I was young. And yeah, it was, we, to this day, I don't know why he ditched me. Maybe he just thought my novel wasn't worth it. I do know, I found out later, he started his own agency, and maybe he just thought I wasn't worth it as a client to bring over to his solo agency. Whatever the case may be, that one unfortunately didn't work out.
You said just before that it was a bit of a blow to your ego, but what about to your desire to write? Did you still want to write afterwards, or were you at that time kind of like, might just take a little break from fiction writing and move to something else?
No, it actually made me angry, right? In fact, Cacophony, I had already started Cacophony at this point. I was so angry that it kind of poured out into Cacophony just a little bit. And it's kind of funny because the ending was way darker. I don't know if you've read the novel, but I don't want to give spoilers away to the listeners in case they want to pick it up. But the original ending was way darker, and I remember my mom read it. And at this point, by the time I was ready to show it to my family and friends to get their feedback, I had kind of calmed down a little bit and everything, taking a breath. But it was kind of funny because my mom was like, this ending is way too dark. It doesn't match. Because before I was kind of more kind of billing it as a supernatural thriller, kind of an urban paranormal story. And she said the ending just didn't match what preceded it. And she even said, listen, if you want to write a dark ending, nothing wrong with that. But just for how you wrote everything in the first 3 parts of the book, it didn't make sense. And actually, my mom that was really good feedback. So I went back and retooled the ending a little bit, and very much so, because since it's come out, I've had people tell me that they thought the ending was really good. So that was actually great feedback on my mom's part. But yeah, so it made, like I said, that it was a blow to my ego, but it didn't discourage me from writing, but definitely made me angry write a little bit.
It's really cool to hear that your parents were so supportive of your ambition, of your talent. A lot of times when kids might show some type of talent in regards to something in artistic endeavor, parents might be discouraging in regards to that. I know my parents weren't really that big on myself doing it, and that's why when my kids show any type of interest in anything, like my older son, for example, is like loves filmmaking, and he grabs my digital camera and he films his own stuff. And I say, do whatever you go ahead, explore, do whatever you want to do. I'll back you up, whatever. And I'm sure having that support from your parents through thick and thin would have been really cool for you, not only as a young writer, but also, going through something like that kind of experience where you're gonna, you kind of like go ahead with the pitfalls of the industry. Would have been very hard on you if they weren't there to kind of support you and such. I imagine that it would have been very difficult for you to bounce back from that.
Yes, and that is one thing I am very blessed for, is my parents never discouraged me from writing. Now, a couple of my short stories and ideas, they've said, hey, listen, we don't really care for that one, but it's always in the spirit of constructive criticism. I have to say that is one thing I am very blessed about. Is now they did tell me, have a fallback plan in case writing doesn't work, in which that's, professionally I do marketing. And so that's kind of become my fallback plan. But I am very thankful for them, because my dad actually, he recently edited one of my novels, and he did a fantastic job. I'm not quite ready to announce, when that one's coming out, because I've got Blessed Child coming out in July. But I am but he did a fantastic job, and I'm just really blessed to have my family all get involved. My mom, like I said, she gave me really good feedback with Cacophony. My sister, she actually did the cover for Blessed Child, and like I said, my dad edited my upcoming novel, which I'll announce sometime after Blessed Child. But so they've always been involved in my novel writing in some capacity, and I really appreciate that.
When did the switch come over to nonfiction writing, especially on the web? Because I imagine, I know you went to seminary college, right? And
Mhm.
then you had a professor or such, and she kind of encouraged you to do some writing in kind of like the nonfiction realm. Is that correct?
Oh, that was not in my seminary. Prior to going to seminary, I attended a college in Beaumont, Texas called Lamar University, and I had a professor there who encouraged me. I took some because, like I said, I was starting to get into marketing as a profession, and I mentioned that I was trying to get Cacophony published at the time. I had just barely started outlining this, or I shouldn't say outlining, but making notes on the Seven Royals, and she said, "Hey, listen, you should take this media class because it was a public speaking course." And she had read my speech because you gave your speech and then you did it and you had to turn in your notes for that speech. And she
Mm.
said, "You're actually a really good writer." And she gave me an A for that particular speech. And she said, "You should take this journalism course." And that is kind of how I got into the nonfiction stuff. I and I would write for this website. I don't want to say the website's name, so I don't want to disparage them, but I wrote reviews for a particular website. It was a movie review website, and that relationship didn't end as well as I would have liked. But later, that definitely influenced me in starting my own website, and then later working for Red Millennial, Red Alert Politics, and then later the Daily Wire.
Was the first blog you had, that was Jacob Airey .blog? Is that right?
Well, yes, that was its second name. Its original name was Lone Star Daily, but no one cared, and so that's why I changed it to just my name, jacobairey.blog, and around I think when I launched my YouTube channel, so 2016, which became Studio Jake, I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna sync them. I'm gonna turn Studio Jake to also the website, and I, but yeah, it was Lone Star Daily for a while, and then it was not for very long, maybe about a year, and then it was jacobairey.blog, and then now it's StudioJakeMedia.com.
So when you start your blog and you start delving into, pop culture writing and movie review writing and such, what's the web space like at that time? Social media at that time would have just been like beginning to really peak and thrive, wouldn't it? And what else could you remember about that time writing for your blog and and what the web space was like? Because I think, for me, when I think well, so it was probably be around 2012 when the blog probably went up. I would have been in the game for around 6 years, and I think that was around a time when Facebook was really starting to thrive, Twitter as well, and such. So I imagine for yourself, it would have just been a real kind of fruitful time to kind of like dive into that stuff and get a lot of movie reviews up and a lot of articles as well.
It's true, and in 2012, you are correct. That's actually the exact year I started what was then Lone Star Daily, and what was surprising to me was how much people wanted reviewers like you and me who just had a love for filmmaking, a love for animation. Especially if you go back to my older stuff, I talk a lot about animated films. I still do, but now that I've incorporated live action, there's a little bit better blend. But um, that was something that I always thought was intriguing. Was one of the reasons I stopped writing for that Christian movie review site was they censored my review of a film called Parker with Jason Statham. And in my
Mm.
review, I made it clear. I said, "Hey, listen, this is a film that glorifies violence and being a thief and everything. So from a Christian perspective, it's not very good, but it's." And then I kind of casually just said, "But it's a good popcorn film. So if you want to just go to the movies and get a bucket of popcorn, this is the movie for you." And they censored my review and totally changed my final paragraph, and that really made me upset. And that's
Mm.
what led me to start the website. And I was stunned by how many people just wanted an honest audience member to give their take on a film. And there's in the mainstream media space, there's you've got all these big names who do it, but they're still kind of corporatized. So guys like you and me and Christian Toto and Jester Bell, we're all in sort of in the indie space where we don't really have a corporate overlord to tell us how to write. And I didn't have the audience I have now. I'm very grateful that my audience has grown so much. But just the feedback of people telling me, "Hey, listen, this is exactly what I thought." I mean, I disagreed with you on this point and that point, but that's really what I was feeling when I walked out of the movie. And so I even challenged myself to watch movies and not review them, so that way I never kind of lose touch with just being an audience member. And I think that practice has really helped me maintain that objectivity. But yeah, back then I was really I don't want to say I was flooded with that kind of feedback, because I was still just getting started, but the amount of emails I was getting from people from that then email that I had that responded, it was very much hey, thank you for saying this, because I heard so and so review it this way and I thought it was overly harsh, or I thought it wasn't harsh enough, but then you came in and said this and it made a lot of sense to me.
And 2012 was a very interesting year superhero movie wise, because that was the year that the Avengers movie came out. And so that was like now, and that was the first Marvel MCU Disney release, because before it was Paramount Pictures that had all of that. And I remember very clearly
wasn't Age
Disney,
of Ultron the first Disney release? I
I'm
thought
trying to
Paramount did the first Avengers.
from what I remember, I think it was like a joint kind of thing, but I
Oh,
remember
okay.
specifically going to a Disney screening for it here in Sydney.
Oh, okay,
Because
okay.
I'm pretty sure that was kind of like the first movie that kind of
That was
like
when
a
they
joint kind of
bought
thing.
Marvel Comics. So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, or Marvel Entertainment as it became known. But yeah, that does make sense that it would be a joint production.
Because I remember the opening credits was kind of like Paramount Pictures presents a Walt Disney film, or just something like
Mm.
really weird like that. So it was kind of like that kind of first time that kind of started happening. It was even before, I'm pretty sure it was even before like Disney bought that Paramount rights, and then later they got the Fox stuff and the Star Wars stuff and all that. So in a sort of way, that was kind of like the turning point, I think, in a lot of things that we're kind of seeing now in the whole kind of especially the pop culture industry on screen, as much as anything else. Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. I want to move to something, a little game I like to play. It's called Choose Between Two. So, Jake, I'm going to throw two options to you based on the same theme. And I want you to tell me what is going to be your choice, and just to talk about a little bit as to why that would be. The first one, I think I know what the answer is, but I'm curious anyway. Um, so this is a movie one. Sidekicks or Karate Kid?
Oh man, that's so hard. I'm gonna go with Sidekicks because it has Chuck Norris. But man, that's a hard one because they're both really good coming of age martial arts films. But Chuck Norris's presence leans me more toward Sidekicks.
I love Sidekicks when I was a kid. I remember seeing that you talked about how that's kind of like a film that you liked that other critics didn't like. And I remember watching that when I was a kid, loving it, because I was a huge Chuck Norris fan when I was a kid. You know, Lone Wolf McQuade and movies like that. And Jonathan Brandis was a big star back then as well. And I was thinking about, movies I can show my kids, because I don't want to show them stuff that's too violent yet. And I've shown them Karate Kid, and I've shown them a couple other things. So I was like, oh, Sidekicks will be a good one. Interestingly, didn't wasn't Chuck Norris first asked to play the role of Kreese in the Karate Kid movies, and he's like he didn't want to play a villain. Is that something that
I don't
happened?
know if he was asked. I think he was on the short list because he had
Right.
played villains. He had played villains before in obviously
Way of the
The Way of
Dragon.
the Dragon, and then
Yeah.
in another one called Slaughter in San Francisco, I think.
Right.
Um, but he didn't like playing villains, and I have actually heard Stallone talk about this. They didn't all those '80s action stars. They don't like playing villains, so
No.
that does not surprise me. But I don't know if he was approached or if he was just on the short list or something like that. I want to say I could be incorrect about that, but I think he was just they just said, hey, he would be a good person for this one.
Okay, next one. So the question is the better detective. And not to do it's just about the character as a whole. Okay, you can put all the movies, the writing, the novels, everything all together. Better detective, Batman or Sherlock Holmes?
Oh, see. You know, I'm gonna have to say Sherlock Holmes. And as Batman is called the world's greatest detective, that's in his time. But I think Sherlock Holmes is a slightly better detective. He seems to be able to solve mysteries without his fist. If you read the books, and that's not a slight. Batman's my all-time favorite comic book character, but just looking at it objectively, I'd have to go with Sherlock Holmes. His method of deduction seems to work more in his favor than Batman's gadgets and his own detective skills.
It was the Sherlock Holmes books that really kind of like open up your eyes in regards to the potential of writing as a career, wasn't it? I mean, those were the books that really
Oh
kind of like
yeah,
spoke to you, yeah.
oh yeah. The first novel that I got ever, like the first real novel, was my parents got me a kids version of The Hound of the Baskervilles. And that really inspired me. That actually, because I had already loved reading, even as a kid. I had a Knights of the Round Table book. I had Black Beauty. My parents had a really nice little, and again, these are kids edition at the time because I was really little. But that's what actually inspired me to write, was The Hound of the Baskervilles. After I read that, I said, I want to write characters like this. And right after we moved, because they gave it to me because we were moving from Beaumont, Texas to Dallas, which is where I grew up. And I read it the whole car ride, and as soon as we got established, I was like, I want the full version of The Hound of the Baskervilles. My parents kind of debated it because I was in third grade, but they're like, hey, you know what? It's Victorian.
Hmm.
It's not going to be that bad. You know, it's not like they're, you know, it's going to have be a little bit more smooth. So we went to our local library, and they got me a unabridged version of The Hound of the Baskervilles, and I never looked back. But yeah, that was the book that definitely inspired me to write. And I still have that little kids version. I've kept it all these years, just to as a reminder of this is what kicked off your love of writing.
Speaking of love of writing, do you prefer fiction or non-fiction writing?
I prefer fiction. I always kind of force myself to read nonfiction because I think it's important to be well read. But I prefer fiction. I mainly read these days. I mainly read thrillers and sci-fi and some fantasy.
Next one, physical media or streaming? Where would you like to watch your TV and movies? Physical
I
media or
prefer
streaming?
physical, but these days it's a little bit harder. I unfortunately, after college, I had to get rid of a lot of my DVDs. I sold a lot of them to pay off college bills and pay off debts and stuff. Bought a car with some of the stuff I sold, but I've been since I've established myself in Phoenix specifically. I opened up my video cabinet. I was like, I used to have, when I was in college, I had a DVD collection 3 times the size. So I'm
Hmm.
working to slowly restore it and build it back up because I do prefer that physical media over the streaming. I can't explain it because it's honestly not, as far as watching the movie, it's not that different, but just the nostalgia of, I'm going to select this movie, I'm going to put it in, because you do a little bit more work with it, a little bit. And I like that experience more.
I think something that draws me to physical media more than streaming as well is that I actually own it, where with streaming, rights can be taken away and go onto another place, and then you have to get another streaming. And there's so many different streaming platforms now. It's so expensive
Mm-hmm.
at the end. I said to my kids, "Go look, we're just having two, and that's it." Because we can't afford all this stuff anymore. And the other thing that's been really bothering me over the last year or so is that so many movies are being censored.
Mm-hmm.
Disney are blurring images or using visual effects to hide things, and Fox, or which I guess is Disney as well, but they're taking language out of like the French connection that might be considered, triggering or whatever the hell what verbiage I want to go with. And I'm like, well, I'm happy I got that original double disc that I bought back like in 2000 or something, and it still looks
Mm-hmm.
good, and I can hear it all. And I think that's something that's really concerning to me. And also, I think physical media is going to come back in a big way. I could see
Oh,
it
I
as the new
totally agree
vinyl.
with you. I totally
Yeah.
agree with you, especially as these streaming service, like you said, get more expensive. I definitely agree with that.
Last one. Okay, so you're at the cinema. You're about to watch the film. What's your favorite go-to cinema food? Popcorn or candy?
Oh, actually, hot dogs.
Ah,
uh,
interesting.
Yeah, I love buying theater hot dogs. I don't know why. That's actually something that started when I moved to California for all those years. I there was a there's a really big ArcLight theater. I think it's actually, sadly, I think it closed down because of the pandemic in Sherman Oaks. And
Mm.
I really loved their hot dogs. And I just kind of got in the habit of buying hot dogs. And that's now my go-to snack every time I go to the theaters. I just get a hot dog and a Coke.
Awesome. Very cool. I want to talk about your time at the Daily Wire because it's really interesting how just looking at some of the videos you've done and such, like you mentioned before, the Andrew Clavin one that you did with him where you talked about superhero movies. You were with him for a few years. What was it like working at the Daily Wire at that time? Because at that, I think it was just before they started going into more they were making their own um films and TV shows and such. So kind of like I wouldn't call them small, but it was definitely before like a big rise that they had, say, around the Trump presidency. I think that's when those like really went big. What
And
was it
that's
like
actually when
working
I
with them at
joined.
that
I
time?
joined right after the Trump
Oh,
inauguration.
okay, right.
Yeah, it was just after, and it was a lot of people, when I tell people this, they're kind of disappointed because unless there was like some big event, it was honestly just like working in an office. Because
Mm,
I was on the social media team. I was one of the marketers. No secret there. And I they had originally hired me to write for a different website called Conservative News. That website, RIP. And so they moved me over, and because of my marketing experience, they asked me to join the marketing team. And honestly, it was, and I said, yeah, sure, as long as I can still write articles. And they graciously let me, and I wrote a lot of reviews and news coverage for them. It was a lot of fun. But just the day to day was honestly just kind of like working in an office. It was never boring by any stretch, but it was kind of like you come in, you sit down at your desk, and you do your work. One of my favorite experiences was I was the permanent replacement host for a small show they used to do called Friday Live, RIP. Again, that was hosted by Michael Knowles and Alicia
hmm
Krause. And when
hmm
Knowles couldn't make it for whatever reason, they would have me tag in, and I really enjoyed that experience because it really taught me a lot about hosting, whatnot. They had the guy who was in charge of the productions at the time. He really was a good guy and really helped me get my start as far as that goes. And it was a simple production because we just filmed it in one of the conference rooms, but that was when it was good. Now, if Ben was about to do an event, that then it would hop, like the Politicon debate with Cenk Uygur. I was privileged to be part of that team to get us ready for Politicon, being doing the marketing stuff, and that was a busy week just getting ready for that event because it was Ben had been at the previous year's Politicon. That's actually how I met Ben, and as well as Aaron Bandler, who's he used to write for Daily Wire, now he writes for the Jewish Journal. That I actually met both of them at Politicon, so that was really cool. And so getting ready for the campaign of going back to Politicon, that was a lot of fun as well. That time was really popping, and so unless there was something like that going on, it honestly was just kind of like coming in and going to work.
I was watching rewatching your debate that you had with, well, I wouldn't call it debate, but kind of like your defense of superhero movies with Andrew Clavin. Because he and both I think Matt Walsh as well are like very kind of like anti kind of superhero movie stuff and such, where Ben is much more kind of open to it. And I don't know where Michael's position is, but I think Jeremy might be a little bit open to it as well.
Jeremy
Um,
tends to like DC comic stuff more than Marvel.
mm,
Knowles, it honestly depends on the movie. He really liked The Dark Knight, but then he hated one of my favorite movies, which is Avengers: Infinity War. So
mm.
it goes back and forth like that.
And so that was like 6 years ago that you had that debate with him. And I was thinking to myself, if that debate happened today, would your defense of superhero movies be different to where it was back then, considering I don't know what your stance is. I think it's similar to mine. I think it's definitely like a downshift of quality of these movies. And I have my own personal theory as to why that is. But besides that, would your defense of it be a little different now as it was 6 years ago, when around that time when like superhero movies, I think, really just hit the peak of its powers and popularity around that time?
Yes, it would be a little different. I would mainly try to argue from titles nowadays. So instead of saying, because that debate was more about the genre. Superheroes are a subgenre of science fiction or fantasy or speculative fiction. And I would probably so that debate was more about the genre of superhero films, its tropes, Clavin's dislikes, my likes, and so on. But so now I probably would have handled that debate with more about titles. So I would talk more about The Dark Knight or the first Iron Man, and really maybe so more lift up those movies than I would just talking about the genre specifically. 2018, there was no sign that the MCU was going to fail. It was everyone thought that it was going to ride that train until 2025, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But yeah, where I am now, I agree with you. I think there has been a downturn in quality, and I really think that's because Marvel, or I should say Disney, has chased away all the big talent or has moved them around. So Jon Favreau, a lot of people don't know this about him. He was at Paramount helping plan the MCU when it was at Paramount Pictures.
That's right.
And a lot of people don't remember that, but he did direct Iron Man 1 and 2, which I think I've debated this as well. I think Iron 2 is very underrated. I don't think it's as bad as people say. Well, there you go. And but they moved him to Lucasfilm, right? And then they promptly blocked him off there as well, because he was doing the best stuff at Lucasfilm at the time. So I think that so if Clavin was to say, hey, Jacob, would you come back on and let's have the second debate? Now I would make it more about titles and quality as opposed to the genre overall.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you will love. I think a theory I have, especially regards to the MCU, because I think you can't really compare what the recent Zack Snyder kind of universe stuff he was doing over there to what the MCU was, because the MCU was like the thing with superhero movies. I think where they kind of like messed up is that they try to continue working with characters that had reached the natural end of their conclusion with with Endgame.
Yeah,
at the end of that movie, that was it for those characters, and they continue just to try to work on them. They wanted to revamp Captain America and Black Widow, new Black Widow, and all that stuff. And I think by that time, people were just like, we went on this ride. We shared the ups and downs and everything else, and that was the perfect time where they could have gotten their Fox properties and really done something with them. And for some reason, they still really haven't done anything. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, there was actually rumors that Wolverine was going to be in Endgame, and I remember at the time I reported on that and actually said, "Oh, this is perfect. This is how they pass the torch." I don't think they had fully bought Fox by Endgame. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but there was definitely, they were in talks. And I was like, this is perfect. This is how they can bring it in. They introduced the X-Men, the Fantastic Four. I know Chris Hemsworth, his contract had gotten extended. That's great. They still have that Avengers connection and they can keep doing Spider-Man. But they didn't do that. Like you said, they just wanted to just keep beating the dead horses. I think I said this to another YouTuber. One of my issues with it was after Endgame, they should have just made Avengers films. So then and maybe stuck with like Spider-Man, some of the more popular characters, but they should have just had everyone do these ensemble films where it revolves around the Avengers. I think that, and maybe Guardians of the Galaxy just to have their story arc close. But otherwise, I think that if they had just done that, I think it would have made more sense to people, because they're like, oh yeah, of course, Avengers Endgame, and then they have, Avengers New Dawn or Avengers Reassembled, which was a real story arc. But they didn't do that. They just wanted to keep pushing all the solo ones. And I think you're on point. It's just they had run their course and the new characters just weren't connecting.
No, they weren't at all. You cover a lot of different pop culture things for your writing. We just talked about superhero movies and comic books and such. One thing that you covered I never really got into, and believe me, I do want to get into it, is anime. I don't know what it is about anime. So it is a very kind of niche kind of thing, but I probably like anime because I loved watching Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid. And I think there's a lot of anime in that stuff, like even things like it, like Thundercats or Transformers. I think there's like little elements in there. Speed Racer, for example.
Speed
There's stuff
Racer
in there as
was an
well.
anime, by the way. A lot of
And
people didn't know that.
I guess I don't know whether Astro Boy was or not. I'm not sure, but I
Astro
think
Boy was
so.
actually the first Japanese anime that got a national release. There had been one prior called Gigantor that had been
Right.
released in New York City, but only to New York. They had done it, but then Astro Boy went public, and then of course there was Robotech, which was actually a combination of 3 different anime. Each season was a different anime that they just made into one story arc.
I
But
guess
yeah. I'm
Was
sorry.
Voltron anime? Voltron, is that
No,
anime
no,
or
Voltron was made by, oh, I can't remember the name of it, the company, but Voltron was not technically an anime, but it was, there's a subgenre of anime called Sentai, and which is, you hit a button and your suit powers up. It's kind of like Magical Girl for guys,
right,
very similar to Power Rangers. And it
right.
was that Voltron was kind of based on those stories. Transformers was definitely Japanese influenced because the toys came from Japan, but the
Yeah.
actual show was made. It was made in the United States.
So if you were to recommend me anime films or TV shows or whatever to start me off my journey down the anime road, what would you do with me? I mean, you know my background, you know I like comic books, you know I like stuff like that. What would you do as kind of like that kind of gateway product to kind of get into the anime genre?
If you're looking for a film, definitely Ghost in the Shell, but can't watch that with the kids, just to warn you.
Yeah.
But definitely Ghost in the Shell. It's very cyberpunk. A lot of it credit it with making cyberpunk popular. It was one of the first anime films to go international as far as popularity. And for TV show, I recommend Cowboy Bebop. It's one of my top 10 favorite anime. If you can, and I know all my fellow anime fans are gonna collectively scream when I say this. The English version is actually better than the Japanese, and it's Steve Blum voices the main character, Spike Spiegel. Recently, Netflix tried to remake it. I didn't even bother watching it after I saw all the clips they had
That was
released.
like a live action kind of thing, was it?
Yes, yeah, they did it
Yeah.
with Stephen Chow, I think. Which it's
Right.
kind of interesting because Spike Spiegel is Jewish, but then they casted an Asian man to play the part. But anyway, highly recommend that series. Again, you can't watch it with the kids in the room, but it's very sci-fi noir. It's these two partners that are bounty hunters, Spike Spiegel and his cyborg friend, and they end up picking up a little girl hacker who hacks their ship, and she wants to go into space. So they end up recruiting her. And then, of course, Valentina, she is kind of a femme fatale that at first is an antagonist, but then she ends up joining the crew. And it has a really fantastic ending. It has a film spinoff that takes place before the finale. That it actually came out after the show ended, but they put it, but just chronologically, it's before the finale, and it's called "Knocking on Heaven's Door," Cowboy Bebop, "Knocking on Heaven's Door." I recommend. Uh, so those would be the two I would say to start with. Just going by your posters and the other stuff you've praised on your channel, I think that those two would be ideal to get you started.
Okay, excellent. Because I do want to get into that stuff because I do like the
Oh, and
craft and the art of that stuff.
if you can, try to find Ghost in the Shell because they digitally remastered it, but all they did was
Right.
put in this weird CGI footage. If you can, try to find the one that's just fully 2D animation,
Okay.
because I've seen both versions, and the original '80s version before they remastered it. I think it was for the 20th anniversary. They digitally remastered it, but to me, the original one is way better.
Okay. Awesome. We're going to move on to another game now. This is called Rapid Fire Questions. I'm going to throw a question out here. To top of your head, tell me what your answer is, and you feel free to talk more about it if you want.
Okay.
So the first one, who is your favorite cinema Batman?
Uh, or live action or animated?
Live action.
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale. See, my one is interesting in that I think Christian Bale was the best Bruce Wayne, but I actually like Michael Keaton as the best Batman, if that kind of makes sense. Because The thing about Bale that kind of puts me off a bit with the whole Batman thing was the voice.
Yeah,
Especially I remember watching The Dark Knight. And I watched it at IMAX, so everything's just really big and loud, right? But when he first spoke in that film, I was just like, oh, that's kind of
well,
odd.
what makes me tip toward Christian Bale is Nolan's direction is, and I agree with you, the voice weirded me out too. That's one problem I do have with that trilogy. However, Nolan was not a nerd, but he did his research. He had
Hmm.
read Batman: The Long Halloween and Year One. Thank goodness he hadn't read The Dark Knight Strikes Again or The Dark Knight Returns, because everyone wants to base their Batman off that. But
Right.
so he did more of the early Frank Miller stuff, which was really good. And also Heath Ledger read all these Joker graphic novels to prepare for his role. May he rest in peace. So I really think that was what tips it off for me. Tim Burton, you can tell he was just going off on studio notes to create his Batman universe. And no shade, because I think that they came off really well, but there's just some finer details about the way he directed those movies, where as a Batman fan, I'm kind of like, I'm not crazy about that choice. But that's a personal preference. That's not a criticism of Tim Burton or even Michael Keaton, who I do think was a good Batman.
Do you think, like, I actually also liked what Ben Affleck did with the character, but I think the problem I had with a lot of the Affleck Batman was not so much his performance, but just the way the directors kind of like
I
utilized it.
agree.
Would that be a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if he had a different director, he would have done really well. Because I have a problem with directors. They either want to do too young Batman or too old Batman, and that was
Right.
another reason why I liked the Dark Knight trilogy. Was he was at his prime, at least in the first two films.
Yeah.
But if they were to do an old man Batman, Ben Affleck was the correct choice. It's just like you said, he kind of got bad direction. Because again, Zack Snyder, what did he say? Oh, I read the Dark Knight Returns. If that's the
Mm.
only thing you read, then you have kind of a warped view of Batman, because you don't have all the backstory to why Bruce Wayne is how he is in the Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
And I think Ben Affleck suffered for that. And I know I'm gonna have all the Snyder fans screaming at me, but I actually liked Ben Affleck better in the theatrical version of Justice League that Whedon directed. Not saying it was better. I will objectively say the Snyder cut is better. However, Whedon had a better grasp on the character of Batman in his cut. So that, just going off there.
Fair enough. There was a tweet that you put out a few years back, and the tweet was Christopher Nolan is the only visionary director working today. Do you still stand by that statement?
I've kind of oh man, that's so hard, because I feel like there are a lot of great up and coming directors, but to me, a visionary is someone. And by the way, I didn't mean of all time. I just
Yes, I
at the
just went
time.
right now.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
Right now, I'm saying,
yes.
but I do think that there are people who are up and coming who are doing good, like Matt Reeves, for instance, like
Mm.
Colin Trevorrow. I actually like their stuff a lot, but I just don't know if it crosses into the realm of visionary. To me, a visionary, they develop their own unique style, their own way of telling things. Um, and one of the only reasons I didn't throw in, say, Tim Burton, was I felt like Tim Burton, he had kind of lulled in his career a little bit at that time. And that
Yeah.
was kind of my point, because people were saying, well, what about Ridley Scott? I'm like, what has Ridley Scott done anything? What was the last time he did a movie that just united everyone and said, yeah, this is an amazing film? Same with James Cameron. And people are trying to tell me Denis Villeneuve. I'm like, making a movie slow does not make you a visionary. So,
Mm.
but yeah, but I will say, some people did ask me later, like, well, what about animated directors? And I was like, okay, you got me there. Hayao Miyazaki is definitely a visionary director as far as animation. And I probably should have clarified that. I was mainly talking about live action directors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I should have clarified. And I did clarify that in the commenting to people. I was like, well, I was speaking about this, but yes, if you say Hayao Miyazaki, of course I'm going to say he's a visionary director. But it's one of those things I don't know, because I've not really seen a movie uh, since Oppenheimer, again, Christopher Nolan, that I thought, wow, a visionary made this. I've not. That's why it's so hard. I've seen good films, but I haven't seen a great film in a long time. And like I said, I consider Oppenheimer a great film, but just it's hard to say that. So I guess I'll say for now I stand by it. I don't know what else, where else to take that, because I just haven't seen anyone where I like this guy's a visionary, if that makes sense.
Next one. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes, yes, of course it's a Christmas movie. It's got the mall Santa, it's got Christmas presents, it's got the Christmas music. So it takes place on Christmas. Yes, Die Hard is it's a Christmas action film. It was really funny. 20th Century Fox, before they got bought out by Disney, they actually did a Christmas trailer for Die Hard,
Right.
and I thought it was hilarious. Like they even got they got a narrator who sounded like he was right out of the 90s to narrate it. It was really funny. So yes, I consider it a Christmas movie. Like Batman Returns, I consider Batman Returns a Christmas movie.
See, I think I'm just like the only one on the island and just sticking to no. I really am. I mean, if Die Hard is a Christmas movie, that means Lethal Weapon has to be a Christmas movie as well, right?
Oh, show me the lie. I mean, that's for me, I have a really low bar on what constitutes a Christmas movie. So
Right.
that could be that could be the issue there. Because like I made a list on my own website, 10 top 10 odd Christmas movies, and Batman Returns, Iron Man 3 was on there. So that was
Right.
kind of a fun list to make. But yeah, like I said, my bar is really low. If there's a mall Santa, okay, it's probably a Christmas movie.
Last one, pineapple on pizza. Yes or no?
Yes, but I should clarify, I don't consider it a pizza. I consider it a dessert. If it has fruit on it, it's a
Ah,
dessert.
so that's a transition. So you put fruit on the pizza, it transitions to a different thing. Is that what we're saying then?
Exactly. It's a
Okay.
dessert. You can still call it a pizza, but it's a dessert. It's not a meal.
Very, very. That's a very interesting answer, because a lot of the answers have gone so far as like a firm yes or a firm no. It's like I don't put it on there, because like they say, nothing sweet and such like that. But that's actually a good compromise. I appreciate that one. Thank you very much for that, Jacob. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video, one of the best on-demand streaming services available. Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. Okay, I wanted to talk about something that is kind of like a bit of a theory of mine, and I wanted to share it with you because we're both kind of like big comic book guys, pop culture guys, and we're Christians as well. I have a bit of a theory. So I don't know what it's like in the US, and I think it might be similar. So here in Australia, recent census numbers have shown kind of like Christian people marking Christian on the census has been going way down. And some people, I don't know, it was the last census, I think it was the one back in like 2018 or 16, actually put down Jedi as their preferred. I don't know whether that's a spoof or whether that's like a earnest kind of like a answer, but it kind of made me think with a generation of people. I'm not talking about a generation under us, but say our generation. A lot of people moving away from faith, from religion, whether it be Christianity or whatsoever, and the rise of pop culture as well. Do you think people have been filling the void of religion with pop culture? Because there's some people that kind of treat some of these heroes and such, and as magnificent as they are, as kind of like icons in a sort of way. And we both know that's very much a sin. It's like one thing to say to give praise to an art, but it's another thing to actually worship it. And I think a lot of people are kind of tending towards a worship than the praise. What's your opinion on that?
I think you're right. I do think, because I even see this being a part of the anime fandom. It's you get to a point where you're debating with someone about subs versus dubs, and the
Mm,
subs people are nuts. And just seeing that, you can tell they're filling a void in their life. And I remember, because I've been a very heavy critic of Zack Snyder. I make no secret of it. And I remember one time this guy responded to me and said, "You just criticizing him is hateful." And I
right.
went, "Whoa." I said, "You must live a very, very luxurious life if your idea of hate is me not liking your favorite director."
Right.
But what does that mean, right? Because if you hate something a lot of time, and the Bible makes this clear, when you hate something enough, it's almost akin to a murder, right? Christ says that if you hate someone so much you think that they should die, that is, you have committed murder in your heart. Christ says, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but I think that I see that with this, that's just taken over, and I think that is parents falling asleep at the wheel, not sometimes when I'll have this conversations with friends of mine who are parents, and they'll just let their kids get away with all kinds of stuff. Where if
Yeah.
I talking back, if I ever talked back to my mother, oh, me and my dad were having a come to Jesus meeting,
Right.
and in some cases it felt literal. But I was with a friend the other day, and it was her friend. She gave her child a command, and he did it, but said something sarcastic back to her. And she didn't do anything about it. But I remember thinking, are you really going to let him talk to you that way? That's very disrespectful. And because it wasn't like just a sarcastic joke, it was like a sarcastic disrespect. And I just didn't say anything, so I didn't think it was my place. But it's kind of like, I think that is a thing of it too, is parents are letting, they're just turning on the TV when their kids get home from school, when they're not having them do activities and fun and whatnot. And I think that is a part of it, is when there's no structure, your what you love becomes your structure. And when I was and I remember times when I was lost as a teenager, and it felt that way. I went through some periods of time in my life where I really struggled with my faith, and especially when I was a teenager. And yeah, it's easy to fall into that, and how it replaces your real faith. And so I agree with you. I think that is a problem, and it's something that parents and as well as churches have to deal with.
I think so too. And I think as well, it comes down to parents just need to take the kids back to church as well.
Yes,
And
yeah.
and
They don't get a
yeah,
choice. You need to
yeah,
tell them, come to
yeah,
church.
yeah.
You're the
And that's why,
parent.
like, exactly right. My wife and I, every Sunday we go to mass with my kids, and they're like, "Well, it's boring." I go, "Well, it's only boring because you're not, investing. So, you got to look beyond just like whatever, whatever Father's saying, whatever. It's like look around you." And I try to explain to them, it's like, the Eucharist is there. Like we got to look around, look at look at the architecture. It's just 2,000 years of rituals come together into this thing. It's like you got to look at it in that kind of lens. And I think I think maybe kids maybe become too used to being catered to and entertained
Mhm.
in certain ways that they don't see the value of mysticism, they don't see the value of worship, they see the value in these things. And I think it's yeah, it's definitely like a thing where I think parents need to up their game and just make sure that they are putting in the right values and everything else as well. And look, Jacob, I've got to say, thank you so very much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to be able to talk to you and dive into your history and talk about all these things. Like all the stuff that I found out about you, like 16 years old and almost have a book published and all these other stuff. It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. And I know that you're very busy. I know you got StudioJake Media, you got StudioJake YouTube as well. And like for everyone out there listening, links at the bottom. Go check out his stuff, and also all the links for all your books as well. I'm going to actually look into getting some books because I want to get more books for my kids now, and I think your books might be really
Well,
ideal for
Seven
them as well.
Worlds is perfect to read with your kids. I wrote it where it's just mature enough where the adults can read it, but there's nothing objectionable in it where a child couldn't read it. And I also tried to write it on a level where parents could and their kids can read it together. That was my full-on intention when I wrote those two books. And the third one is on its way. The finale of the Seven Royals is on its way.
That's awesome because I'm definitely going to get those because I love reading to my kids and always make sure that when we're reading stuff, it's like a my thing, your thing. It's like they might be like, "Hey, can you read me, Big Nate or something like that. I don't know." And I'll be like, "Yeah, okay, but the next thing we're going to read is Prince Caspian, or the next thing we're going to read
Mhm.
after that is so and so, or whatever." So that's really important. I mean, it's always great to be able to. Also, I know it's a big thing as well out there that we need to support indie artists as well, whether it be indie filmmakers, indie comic book writers, or indie authors like yourself. So everyone out there, please check out Jake's stuff. Links down below. And Jacob Airey, thank you so very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again. And yeah. I can't wait to talk again in the future. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me back. I had a great time.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.